usually vote on that in February, don't we? About opening that up or not? We usually vote on that.
Good evening. The hour of 6 p.m. having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Planning Licenses and Development Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel. The video is also posted on the city website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pocket just as you enter the meeting room. The public and other city councilors will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda items under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I will not recognize an individual a second time until everyone who wishes to has had a chance to speak. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by their name and address prior to speaking. Written comments from the public will be accepted at the city clerk's office until Tuesday at 1 p.m. I will now call to order this regular meeting of the Planning Licenses and Development Committee and declare a quorum present. The minute taker is participating remotely this evening, so committee members, please be sure to turn on your microphones when speaking, and if the minute taker is unable to hear you, they will ask you to speak louder or turn your microphone on. So welcome everyone to our meeting this evening. We have a few items on the agenda. We're going to jump right in. Our first item is the Rules of Order Amendment for remote participation, and I believe that the city attorney has some info for us.
Good evening, everybody, and Patty is also here as well this evening, I believe, to City Clerk to speak to this issue or questions if there are any. And I'm sure that she wants me to highlight in this rule the requirement for the 24 hours prior notice, please, to her office in order to be able to make this process work. As you know, we've been talking about this rule for quite some time. The issue that we have mostly been talking about is the question of remote participation. The quorum issues are already set. Just to remind the committee and the public, in connection with remote participation, the law does require that a quorum of the body be present at the location that has been noticed to the public at the time and the place that has been noticed. But the statute does currently allow one or more individuals other than a quorum to participate remotely. And the City Council has been considering that question now for a while. The biggest change, as you know from before, to the Section 4 of your rules wasn't dealing with the reasons for the remote participation, which have to be stated by the individual requesting, but more with the process. At this point, what the process requires is this notification to the city clerk. The notification would be then placed onto essentially the agenda for the city council action to occur, because the city council will have to consider the request at the time of the meeting. So the individual making the request for remote participation would be present on the Zoom at the beginning of the meeting. The mayor would recognize that individual, go through the same process that we go through now, asking the individual where they are, who's present in the room with them, what their reason is for being remote. And then if there is no objection to that, then it would happen by consensus and the individual could participate. If there was an objection to the remote participation, and this is where it is a little bit different, if there is an objection, then it will be put to a vote. And the vote to deny the request would have to require a 2/3 roll call vote. And the roll call vote for the denial is to try and remove any other motivations that may be to not allow an individual to participate remotely at this point. So that's essentially what the rule does. It's been to the council and now to the PLD. PLD needs to make its recommendation. It will go back to the full council at this point.
Great, thank you so much. And just to remind everyone that these changes were born out of a letter by Councillor Greenwald, and he has joined us at meetings and was satisfied with the way the language evolved and turned out. I think we did a lot of massaging, and we've put some work and effort into getting it right, and this is a new rule for the council. So I like the way it's turned out. Do we have any questions from the committee about the way things are presently? All right, seeing none. Anyone from the public wishing to speak? Okay. So I would be looking for a motion.
I'll move to recommend the adoption of the proposed amendment to the Rules of Order relating to remote access.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Giacomo, a second by Counselor Jones. Any questions on that motion? Counselor Jones.
Yeah, just to stay consistent, I'll be voting no. I've been opposed to this from the very beginning. We all know the reasons why. I thought it opens it up to abuse. We've had much more severe abuses happen over the years, and as a matter of fact, this was overwhelmingly defeated at the House of Representatives this week. They tried the same similar amendment to their rules, and it was overwhelmingly defeated. And I voted no there also, so I'm gonna just be consistent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, I would look for a vote. All in favor? And opposed? And that's 3 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries. So items 2 and 3, I'm actually going to take together this evening. Both of these items are similar. They are requests to use city property. One is for the Gathering of the Gourds, the Let It Shine, formerly Pumpkin Festival, and the other is the Taste of Keene Food Festivals with the Keene Young Professionals. Both boards have not met with the city staff as of this point or started protocol meetings. These letters were brought in to council just to get that process underway, and we would be looking for, to put these on more time this evening. Does anyone have any questions about that? Anyone from the public wishing to speak about either of these festivals at this point? There will be opportunities in the future. All right, seeing none, I would look for a motion.
Want to do it?
Sure, go ahead.
Both together?
Yes, and microphone, please.
So I would move to recommend the request to use city property for Gathering of the Gourds and Taste of Keene Food Festival be put on more time to allow for protocols to be scheduled.
Second.
We have a motion by Counselor Jones, second by Counselor Ormerod. Any questions on that motion? Anyone from the public? Seeing none, I would ask for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. And our last item on the agenda tonight, which I think might have brought most of you out, is our Ad Hoc Housing Stability Committee. Final report is in, and I think we have Rebecca Landry giving that to us this evening.
Well, you got there fast.
We are efficient at PLD.
You sure are. So thank you. I'm really glad to bring this report to the committee. There was some discussion about how we were going to bring this forward to the council, and I'm pleased to bring it to and through PLD to the council. We had we started meeting with the Housing Stability Committee. It's an ad hoc group that was created last year with the idea of coming up with recommendations to address the housing. First of all, we had to identify what was the housing problem, and then how do we go about making recommendations to the city council to start implementing some review and management to see what we can do better or what can change in the near future. So I just want to start by saying that we had, I think, 9 members of the committee. They were all very engaged in the process. And I really appreciate how much time they put into this. We certainly had subject matter experts. We had service providers. We had Elizabeth and Natalie Darcy, and we had a number of other city staff people participate. We had visiting guest speakers, and it was really quite an informative process. So all of that information, the meeting agendas and minutes are online. I'm just going to review the membership for you so that the people can hear who participated. Of course, we had the mayor as the chair, Councillor Lake, Natalie Darcy from Human Services, she's a Human Services Manager, Stephen Bragdon, Craig Henderson from Southwest Community Services, Doug Yosway from the Department of Corrections, Josh Meehan from Keene Housing. We had Stacy Pickford and Jennifer Sayer. Jennifer's with the New Hampshire Care Collaborative. So I'm not going to read the report, but I'm going to highlight the recommendations. And I want to start with the desired outcomes, which really was what gave the committee its direction in terms of how did they want to start pulling together recommendations without being all over the place, because this is a big issue and it's not just something that affects Keene. Rural America is seeing a supply and demand issue when it comes to housing. And so Keene is no exception. And as a matter of fact, in New Hampshire for 10 years now, the supply has fallen short of demand, so it's not a new problem either. Before I get any more into the outcomes, I also want to mention that we had quite a bit of participation from the public. The Monadnock Interfaith Group was present at just about every meeting, if not every meeting. And we had members of the public speak at every meeting who were very concerned about where this is going. So it was a very collaborative process. So we started with organizing our thoughts into what we wanted the outcomes of the committee to be. We ended up with 3 categories or 3 outcomes that we wanted to see. And the first, and I would say the one that rose to the top, was homeless support and transition to permanent housing. I'll read to you what we wrote in the report. Homelessness is on the rise and requires positive change. It's a basic human need. It's directly linked to health, social, educational, and economic outcomes. The pressure on rental rates right now is making it harder for low-income individuals and families to get adequate housing. The solution is to provide timely and effective transitional services, which is the ultimate goal. It's to help people transition so that they can have safe, healthy, permanent housing. The committee has recommendations that aim to help the unhoused population transition to immediate and permanent housing. The second desired outcome was more generally speaking, an increase in available housing in general. We talked about there's a supply and demand problem. The pandemic certainly didn't help. It only exacerbated the problem. People are moving to rural New Hampshire for quality of life reasons. It's also further stressed rental rates and the need for housing development in Keene. So we have included some recommendations in the report that we hope will increase housing available to all income groups. And then another category that quickly evolved as a need for specific attention was regional engagement. So we can't solve any housing problems ourselves. There are a lot of challenges and many facets to those challenges, and we need the region to come together and collaborate on solutions. So when it comes to the recommendations of the committee that are all aimed at homeless support and transition, available housing, and regional engagement, we started with housing development. We were recommending a completion of a comprehensive housing needs analysis. That needs analysis survey process has begun, and there's a survey online, and I know that we have people in the community development department already working on this study. So it's nice to be able to say that that recommendation is already getting some movement. So that's great, and I would encourage anyone to take that survey that's available from the city website homepage. So having information from the public is going to help us to create solutions in the long term. We also talked about and recommend updating local zoning laws. So you'll hear a common theme in this report, and it is reducing barriers. That's something that we see as a common challenge. So the 5-acre to 2-acre zoning law change is something that the committee did talk about and recommends. Also along the lines of zoning, looking to support anything that the city can do to provide multifamily residential development in the Commerce District. Again, that conversation is not new. That's something that the committee supported. And then we started talking about incentive options, development incentive options that are available. And we started trying to research, there's this from the state and there's this from that commission. And ultimately, the committee decided on recommending that we leverage all available development incentives to advance the construction of multifamily housing. So there are definitely a lot of housing solutions that can help, but multifamily housing is really what's going to create the most impact in the shortest amount of time. And there's more information on that in the report. Also, accessory dwelling units is something that can help people to potentially stay in their home or provide an option for a family member to have housing that might not otherwise have options. And so the committee's recommending to review the requirements that we currently have. It's already possible in Keene for development of ADUs, But we want to recommend reviewing those requirements and again, see if there are any barriers. How can we make it easier for ADU development? As far as shelter services go, it's really important that we highlight that the city already has case management practices in place. And every single homeless person who presents themselves as homeless and comes to the city is offered a solution, offered assistance. And that's a statutory requirement, of course. But if they opt to participate, there are services available. So we talked about how we can improve the case management process, again, to see if we can reduce barriers. Improve engagement is another thing. There are people who are reluctant to or choose not to engage in the human services that we provide, and so why is that? Let's take a look, see if we can reduce some of that hesitation, and also see if we can increase engagement. So I want to read to you one of the recommendations. This should include evaluation of the possibility of a standard application as well as a review of the city welfare guidelines to add assistance to applicants for acquiring birth certificates, valid identification, and other resources. These are things that some of us may not think twice about, but to someone who is unhoused, it can be very difficult to come about those documents and to acquire those documents. So maybe there are ways we can improve that to be more helpful. And there will be a need for other agencies to do the same. Also, we need to better define residency. So right now there are RSA 165 at the state is providing guidance for how municipalities are required to provide welfare services. And a lot of it is driven by the last town of residence for the person who is applying for services. But that can certainly be improved to increase the participation and responsibility of all New Hampshire municipalities. And the city manager is working very closely on that at the state level. I'm sure she'll have something to say about that when I'm done. The city's also working with the state to map service offerings and track services with our partners in our other communities, but the city is relatively unique in that, so it will certainly help all if more communities can participate in that type of tracking program. Now, NERAP, the New Hampshire Emergency Rental Assistance Program, is something that we covered. This has been really helpful to a lot of people since COVID began. However, it's also problematic because it's really great that someone who can't get room in a shelter, for example, can't get access to services in a shelter, can be given funding to pay for a hotel room. That's good, right? However, the NERAP program comes at a very, very high cost per week, paying the hotel fees, and it did not include any case management. So it's very difficult to know who is, not necessarily who by identifying the individuals, but what is going on, how can we improve it. So the recommendation is that case management services be required to connect all housing participants with available services and transition to permanent housing. So somehow we need to see if we can make that happen. We also identified that there's a need for more homeless outreach services, not just outreach services, but by trained professionals. That's a key term in the report. So I know that we're also working on that here at the city to expand our outreach efforts already. There's need to better support the needs of people in the housing needs of people being released from hospitals and the jail. That was something that we talked about that I think caught some of us by surprise, that there are people who obviously need medical services or perhaps are in are jailed for a short period of time and then released and may not necessarily have a place to go or a way to get there. And so there are definitely short-term improvements that we can make to help people in those situations. Now, the Federal Housing Choice Voucher Program we used to call Section 8, but it's not just Section 8. It's actually, so we just wanted to put that reference in there so it would help you understand. But this is a program that provides rental rates or pays the rental rates for people who are in rentals and cannot afford it. And this is it's a win-win situation. It's good for the landlords and it's good for the people who need housing. However, there are hesitations to participate and there is a potential for some income discrimination. And so the recommendation coming from the committee is that we conduct an educational, or work with Keene Housing to conduct an educational campaign so that more property owners are likely to participate, that we can expand the low-income housing options, which right now are extremely strapped and limited, and also try to support advocacy at the state level. So again, we help improve tenant use and landlord participation. Now, I'm going to read word for word 2 of the recommendations because I know they were hot topics, and we definitely had a lot of discussion on parking programs and camping programs, and so I'll read for you.
Can you give us the page numbers?
Sure, it's on page 4, and it's item number 8 and item number 9. Safe parking programs may provide homeless persons living in their vehicles with a place to stay in the vehicles overnight. The ultimate goal is to provide a temporary safe space in the process of transition to stable housing. The committee recommends encouraging a pilot blue light safe parking program involving Southwest Community Services, local churches, and other organizations who are willing to participate. We did have one pastor stand up and come into the last committee meeting and say, how do I get involved? We want to help. And so that's very encouraging. This will include best practices such as outreach services, police safety checks, lighting, trash removal, bathrooms, training of volunteers, and additional measures necessary for the health and safety of all participants. The city will also play an important role in sharing information with the public so that people know how to take advantage of these services. Secondly, homeless camping is not supported as an option for safe housing. That's number 9 on page 4. The transition to temporary and permanent housing is what is needed. Current city code does not allow for camping on city land. However, the Parks Director has been working with campers to allow some flexibility when they need to transition. And so the recommendation would be that the city code be updated to expressly provide the Parks Director with an opportunity to work with Human Services to help transition campers. So it does not expressly support camping as an option, but it provides some flexibility to help people transition who are in that situation. Also, the Keene Public Library has been hosting office hours for human service providers. That's been going on for about a year now, and it's growing in momentum. And so it does provide a great way for people to connect with service providers outside of City Hall or other places. So I believe it was Councilor Lake, but we did have someone bring up the concern about disposal of needles. We think of needles, it's commonly thought of as something that illegal drug use or associated with illegal drug use, but we quickly learned also that people who are in need of housing may also have reasons for injection of medication. And so in all situations, it's really important that people have needle disposal options, and so the recommendation is that the city look into where is needle disposal currently available, that there are places in the community, how can we share that information, and look into whether or not there's any need to provide more services there. And then we get to the last section, which is regional coordination opportunities. We need to promote opportunities to engage a broader effort in housing services and programs, period. That's really important to making any progress. The first recommendation is that housing development funds use a collaboration of local funding partners. So something happened up in the New Hampshire's Upper Valley last year where 8 employers partnered with developers and housing services to build apartment buildings. So these are businesses who need employees, and they're willing to invest in a solution. And so without getting into too much detail, the committee decided that that would be certainly an opportunity we should consider. And then explore other local funding models, collaborative funding models, and we looked at CAPG, which is the collaborative approach to public good investments. It is where communities use local capital, stakeholder interest, and a collaborative bidding process to source and pay for new services that any single stakeholder could not support at scale. So it's another opportunity for collaboration. We did have a conversation about this with some regional providers and with UNH. So it's not something that we can do in the short term, but we're keeping an eye on it. Let's see. Okay, so there's that. We also made a recommendation to review existing social services and housing initiatives to bring initiatives together to maximize impact. There are a lot of services available out there, and the potential to collaborate and join efforts really could have a broader impact. We know that Southwest Community Services has a homeless coalition group. I know that we have our city team participating on that coalition group. We would like to see them formalize and involve additional social service agencies who may not necessarily be at the table across the region. There was also some discussion about person and family-centered service plans. So right now, let's see, we would like to help people stay in their homes. There are people who need care, and there are people who need long-term care. ServiceLink is an example of a service that can allow people to age in place. So more opportunities to look into that type of program. And shifting to a person-centered entry approach. Right now, when a person needs services, they have to go through an application process, but there may be an opportunity to turn that around a bit and have service providers understand who needs services and offer them in a little bit more of a efficient approach, a more streamlined approach. We did identify, and this comes up in just about everything, but a lack of public transportation options. This is something that is unique, and it is limiting our ability to help people. People should have access to doctor's appointments and grocery shopping from other than just walking distance of downtown Keene, right? And so there's definitely an opportunity, if there's anything that can be done regionally to improve transportation services. It can even help service providers have mobility to get to some of their clients outside of Keene. And then we're hoping to see if we can get more information from all New Hampshire communities to track the services which are being used, how often, and to what end, so we are better equipped to come up with solutions and to participate in solutions. So that's the report with the recommendations. I will say that the common theme was reducing barriers and collaborating. No doubt, just about every recommendation is focused on how we can collaborate and reduce barriers. With that, I think I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you. Rebecca, that's a really great summary of the report, and I'll try not to repeat some of the updates Rebecca provided for you. I need to recognize Rebecca for her efforts on this committee. This was a lot of information and a lot of people participating and a lot of opinions and ideas that she did a wonderful job just bringing it all together in a concise report with some good recommendations that we could get consensus on. So that was not an easy task. So great job, Rebecca, on that. And we did have a lot of participation from the public, and that was great. We learned a lot during this process. And to be honest, I didn't wait for the report to be finished before I started implementing some of these recommendations and exploring some of these things, because it is such a time-sensitive topic and an important topic. So I've given you, the council, some of these updates during the manager's reports, but I'll just touch on a few. Rebecca mentioned the housing need analysis that is underway, and that's really important because that will inform future strategies related to zoning and other housing incentives and things that the city might consider. And so getting a lot of participation in that survey is really important. And the survey will be open through February 17th. And like Rebecca said, it's on our website for anyone who hasn't taken it yet and would like to. We really encourage you to do that. It will take about 10 minutes. Also, this is the PLD committee, so you know that the joint PLD committee meetings with Planning Board has been doing a lot of work around zoning and reducing barriers to increase housing opportunities and even some incentives. And so that work is continuing, and I know you had another meeting this week and started talking about the next step and what more might be brought forth to do that. And then in regards to leveraging development incentives, the Invest NH program became available while we were meeting, and we were able to assist one project in leveraging funds from that fund. That was the 310 Marlborough Street project, which resulted in an additional $3 million being invested in the project. That project is anticipated to add 55 to 57 additional housing units to our community. And the Invest NH dollars will ensure that at least 15 of those units are affordable according to the Invest NH guidelines. Now, affordable is something different to everyone, but the program set its own parameters. And so for those 15 units over the 5-year time frame, they must remain at or below 80% of the AMI limitation. And that's all on their website and broken down. It's different by county and region. The city also has taken advantage of those funds and received 2 grants through InvestNH to help us with the housing needs analysis and to also help us when we get to the point of implementing recommendations from that analysis. And so we've been fortunate to do that. Those InvestNH New Hampshire funds were created from the American Rescue Plan money, and it is being administered by the state. In regards to ADUs, I actually just talked to John Rogers today about this to get the latest update, because as we were having this conversation about ADUs, there are some potential code changes that can come forward to expand ADUs on where they go, encouraging or allowing for ADUs in detached garages and buildings where they might not be allowed now, and also reviewing some of the non-conforming single-family homes in the Commerce District right now that aren't able to add an ADU. So there are some potentials, and that is something that they will be probably bringing forward to the Joint Committee at some point soon.
That was on my short
Yeah.
list of things to ask.
Yeah.
Great.
And then when we get to the section of the report related to recommendations for shelter services, we've done a lot in this area. We have created joint meetings with the shelters. It's every other week where they talk about some of the more difficult and complex cases and how to place people into permanent housing or temporary housing. And that's really been a huge benefit to all of us. We also, this year, changed our shelter agreements. So the city provides funding to both of the organizations that provide shelter services in the community. And as part of those agreements, we added some language about coordinating with the city and reporting with the city. And so when an individual comes to any of these shelters and they identify as being a Keene resident, they must also come to the city of Keene to make sure that we are in the loop and part of their case management moving forward. Now, our case management numbers have grown a great deal because we are putting ourselves in the middle of these conversations, but we are trying to collaborate more with our partners and to find ways to make improvements. And in addition, the committee that had identified barriers for residents in attempting to receive services, and Rebecca talked about this, like driver's license and identification forms and birth certificates. And so that was easy enough. Spoke to our Human Services Director, and that is something that they now can get through the city's welfare system if they are looking to receive services, and that's a barrier for them. That's something that we will support as part of their application. In terms of the standard application for assistance, that recommendation is not so much about ours. We have a standard application. That really is about other communities in our region. So when someone presents as homeless or in need of assistance at the city of Keene, we will provide assistance to them regardless of where their last residence was, or because that is the definition in the law. Every community should be providing that assistance to their residents and when they present to their community as homeless. However, we're trying to work with the communities around us, and oftentimes they have different applications, which we would require different questions being asked, and working with our communities would be a little bit easier if we had some sort of a standard application. Love to see a standard application across the state of New Hampshire, to be honest, but I'd be happy if we just at least had it in the region. And that kind of leads me into the next section about state law changes. I've talked about this before. I think there needs to be a lot of changes to the state law in regards to providing welfare assistance. But we haven't made a lot of progress making those changes in the past. And so this year, we are starting with what I think is a small but important step and I worked with Senator Donovan Fenton to put forward a bill. We don't have a bill number yet, but that bill is proposing a change to the definition of residency as it pertains to housing, shelter, and other responsibilities of municipalities. There was a recent effort by the Welfare Administrators Group to better define that through an ethics resolution. So they worked with their membership to come up with some language, and all I did was take their language and put it into this bill. Because they are the ones that are dealing with this every day. They have a really good understanding of it, and I'm hoping they will help us as this bill moves forward. So I have gotten quite a bit of support so far on this bill, and I'll keep you posted. And then Rebecca talked about the recommendation related to the New Hampshire Emergency Rental Assistance Program that provides funding for hotel stays. That funding is not through the city, it's through the shelter. And originally, both 100 Nights and Southwestern Community Services were receiving those funds, and now it's really just Southwestern. The concern was that those funds were supposed to end, and there were a lot of families in the hotel that we had never seen, and we had never spoken to. And so we needed to have a way to bring those individuals and those families in to help provide case management, one, to understand how many people are in need of service, but also to see if we can be part of the solution in transitioning them out of the hotel. And so we have been doing that. We've already been doing that now. We are working case management with Southwestern Community Services for those individuals in the hotel, and we have seen all of those individuals. And so I'm very encouraged about the changes we've been able to make in case management so far. And then the recommendation around homeless outreach, I've worked with the Human Services Department to change a job description of a part-time position in the Human Services Office to include outreach. We did advertise for it once, and we did not get, it's a 25-hour-a-week position. It's a non-benefited position. It didn't include outreach before, so now it's an even, bigger ask to get someone who can perform those services. And so we're going to go back out again to see what we can get. But I have talked to Human Services and the Finance Department about maybe needing to add it to our salary schedule. My original thought was to do this as a pilot, see if we need to change the job description more. But the problem is as a pilot, it's hard to get someone. And people are looking for some stability. And so that's something we're talking about right now, of how we might go back out again for this position. So you'll be hearing more from me on that. And I know that I've mentioned in the past, I have been working on putting together a grant to try to access some of the opioid grant funds that is coming into the state. The governor had put me on that commission, and they've already done one round of applications. And so what I'm looking to do is put in an application for the police department, and it would be for a social worker position. And we have been meeting, we met with the city of Laconia, and we met with the city of Dover, and we've looked at both of their models. And I've been working with our former police chief, Chief Russo, on this, and he has a draft ready for me. The next round of applications is going to be going out soon. I just need to work with our current chief to make sure we've got everything in place that we need, and then we intend to apply for these funds. These funds would be good for 2 years, and it is something that other communities are looking more at doing, and so I think it would be a good opportunity for us to see if we could make that work. We envision that position working closely with the outreach worker in the Human Services Office, and that is how the city of Dover does it, although they have them all under one department. So stay tuned for that. Rebecca already talked about the safe parking program. I need to connect back up with Southwestern Community Services to see how they're doing with that and what support we can provide in making the connections with the churches. And then in regards to the homeless camping, We already have Chapter 58 overhaul coming to you. It's been in the works for a while. It will have some language in there. It's addressing a variety of things that we needed to clean up anyways related to city property. And so that's coming forward. So you'll see that soon, probably when the city attorney is back from vacation. Rebecca talked about the library services. That has been a very successful program. We're looking to continue that. And then Rebecca talked about the CAPG model and the Urban Institute collaborative approach to funding. That was a recommendation that we look into that. I did look into that. I had a meeting. Rebecca participated. I had a meeting already in December with UNH about that model, and we all agreed on the call that it wasn't something that we could put in place right now, and it's a out of the box type of funding model that really isn't conducive to city structure, but it could be something that we could help facilitate bringing partners together in the future. But you have to be really ready, and we don't meet the readiness for it just yet. In regards to collaboration of resources between agencies, and we talked about the jail and the hospital, have already had a meeting with the hospital. That occurred earlier this week. We talked about coordination of services and creating this no wrong door model. So Service Link and the New Hampshire Care Collaboratives group, Jen Sayre, who was on our coalition. I learned a lot from her. And one of the things we talked about is that we have the no wrong door model here in the state of New Hampshire, but I'm not sure we really implement it that way. And so we had our first meeting, first of many. We are going to be hoping to expand this to many more service providers, I'm guessing over the next year, to talk about how we can really get to a no wrong door model, which means we're all coordinating our services across the service, spectrum. And that's difficult because we're all getting our funding from different sources, and we are not supposed to be in competition with each other. We're all trying to do the same thing. And so there's got to be a way we can work closer together. And I'm hoping to bring all of the partners to the table with the adoption of this report, or the acceptance of this report by the council. And then tomorrow, I have a meeting with the jail and the county and our police department to talk about the jail release. I did learn during these committee meetings that there's a lot of improvements that we could make on what happens with a homeless person who is incarcerated. I think I mentioned to the council, if they're held overnight on protective custody, and they're homeless, they're let out on Gilboa Ave. You could be homeless, let out on Gilboa Ave without a phone, without a jacket, whatever it is you brought in with, that's what you have. And so I think we can do better than that. And we've had one meeting with the jail already, and we're going to bring the sheriff's office into this next meeting, and the county administrator as well, just to talk about what can we do, even if it's just bringing them to the city's human services department. To see if we can help transition them to where they need to be. So that's a lot for you, I know, but there's been a lot of work happening on this, and that's just a brief, outline of what was included in the recommendations, which I think is a fabulous report, and the things that we've already been moving forward as the committee has been having these conversations. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much for all of that update, both of you. A couple of things that I would like to say really quickly is I just want to say thank you to the community who participated in the collaboration with the city in this process, and to the counselors who wrote the letter initiating a lot of this conversation. There was a lot of work going on behind the scenes all the time, but I think it really brought it to the forefront and helped a lot of these agencies recognize that it's important for them to be working together and collaborating together and getting some of these ongoing groups going. I also I made a couple of quick notes, and you answered some of my questions. I think it's super important as a PLD member to see these ADUs come back in front of the Joint Committee as a real topic. It was brushed over, I think, in the last year as a conversation on one of our agendas, but no real movement started with it. And I would like to see some of the points that you brought up with the ability to have detached ADUs and how do ADUs affect maybe two-family homes where there might be owner-occupied currently, and are they eligible for that, and what other barriers are there to adding these? I also think parking on the street, having street parking eliminates some of the barriers to people's parking requirements for adding units to homes in our densely populated downtown. We're gonna have to visit that at some point. I know that wasn't in the report, but that's been something I've mentioned several times and really want the staff to take note of, and at some point we'll bring formally to the council if we don't see progress on it behind the scenes. I also want to mention the Section 8 conversation with Keene Housing and the collaboration there. As a person who's involved with tenant relationships and homelessness via my husband, understand this program really well. And I understand that it's years-long waits for people to get these vouchers. And that is a huge problem, because what I personally see in the community are housed people in apartments who are on the verge of eviction regularly, who cannot get vouchers. And I regularly say, like, this is a person who just needs a voucher. They are so close to being able to hang on. And there are unused vouchers sitting at Keene Housing, and I know that. And there are people, and I'm sorry to say, like, there are people who have vouchers who can't find apartments. That's another problem. But there are people who could be, that safety net could be brought in before they end up in a camping situation, and us trying to resolve that. So when we have that conversation with Keene Housing, I think that if there's some way to fix that, like, it's like they miss each other, strangers in the night. The folks who are coming to the City of Keene Welfare Office month after month looking for rental assistance, there has to be a way to move them ahead to some of these open vouchers before we lose them into the system. And I've always wondered why that never happened. So while I've got the floor here. And then the last one is, I just wanted to hear there were several items in here that revolved around coordination of potential funds, coordination of Invest New Hampshire money, or building out multifamily, finding resources for that. There were references to that. But obviously that's going to take some time and some staff involvement in coordinating. I also have talked to the Community Development Department at many of our meetings, joint committee mostly, about what can we do zoning-wise, which all of these recommendations are pointing in that direction. So is there a way to find some time where somebody can identify some property that might benefit from some of these investment opportunities as well? And can we be a bridge in some way for that to happen? I mean, I'm going to just use Kingsbury because we all know that property, but what could be brought to the table? What resources can be brought to the table to get some of these projects moving? It's great to make a list and put them on the website, but there are probably folks who don't even realize that this plot of land is something the city's interested in seeing them move forward and get something going on. Go ahead, yeah.
So we do that. That is what MED does. So Med Kupczynski, as the Economic Development Director, talks with people all the time and puts them together with available resources. He made the connection with the Marlborough Street property. We've had multiple connections on the Kingsbury property. We've had multiple people be interested in the Kingsbury property but not be able to come to agreement with the property owner. There's only so much we can do. Right. But when we are actively doing that with parcels that we know are vacant and ready for some sort of development, we do attempt to make those connections. The Invest New Hampshire funds, I will just tell you, even though it's a lot of money, $60 million to housing development, It's very limited. It's only for gap funding. And there's $40 million that are for municipalities, and that is for the things like I talked about, the housing study and incentives around zoning changes and incentivizing that sort of thing. And there's some demolition money, which we are pursuing, the demolition money, for a city project for reuse, a parcel for reuse. But other than that, that $60 million, it had to be out the door so quickly. You really had to have a project already in the works, and then you had to be able to match the funds. And so there was a lot of things that had to align for you to be able to access the Invest New Hampshire money. We're actively involved, and every year the city uses its full allocation of CDBG grant funding applications. We only get, in each category so many, and actually I have service agencies calling me a year in advance to say, we want to be the next one to apply for funds. And so we're already taking advantage of all of those funds as much as we possibly can. But we do that, and we will continue to do that, and any other ideas someone brings forward, we'll be happy to look at that. And we're monitoring other things that other communities are doing as well, like Rebecca mentioned, the Upper Valley and their creative use of businesses looking to bring, employees to their community. And, we had initial conversations with the hospital a year ago about doing something similar to that, and unfortunately it wasn't something that they could move forward with at this time. But it's definitely important, and anyone who is interested in that, Med Kopczynski can be reached in the city manager's office on the 3rd floor.
Well, thank you so much. And I really do I do think that the city has not taken a sit and wait approach to this. I think that I have seen, and through your manager comments at council meetings, the progress that we've already started to make. And I can tell you that there were several items that were zoning related that our committee's already dealt with. And we'll just keep working and finding more opportunities. Councilor Jones?
I've got a few things. First of all, everyone saw this on the agenda tonight, and they thought there were people called who thought we were adopting this or amending this. We're not. We're just accepting this as informational, as a resource. I just want to make that clear for the public. And the other thing the public shouldn't, in case you don't know, that the term ADU was passed around a lot. That's accessory dwelling unit, which years ago was called an in-law apartment, just so you know that. I really like this report. I'm very interested in the CAPG, that's what it's called, and where that can go, that model. I think it's great. I love what you're doing, your intentions with the ADU. I know the chairperson mentioned earlier the Section 8, that there's a long wait for that. Unfortunately, there's no priority for local people. There's people on that waiting list. There's people from all other states and everything else, and nobody gets priority. And that's something and that's because they're using HUD money, so they can't. But if there is a fix for that, I'd love to see it. I don't know what it is. And just the other, for years we've been saying, and this is great, but we don't want Keene either to become a magnet for indigents. We do want to help our own, and that's what we're here for. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, it talked about not supporting the camping. I've been with local church groups out getting people on cold nights, trying to get them to get out of camping and into some kind of shelter, and they just refuse. They just want to be out there. They can't, so it says we don't support them, but there are some that will always be there. Thank you.
Councilor Ormerod?
Thank you. I was really interested in looking at each item and looking for a call-out for the children and pregnant persons, particularly on the homeless side. And I didn't see that anywhere, and maybe it's in there, but those are the people who are most at risk in our community and are least able to reach out for help or know how to reach out for help. And I'm hoping that we at least have some data and some plans for the homeless children. And for those who are pre-K, we want to integrate them into the community so that they do not have an experience of being on the outside, which, if that happens from a very young age, they're going to stay on the outside, and we'll either house them in our housing or house them in our prisons. So I'm quite interested in that, seeing a little bit more detail and granularity in what we can do for that, how we can prioritize that, and to be sure that we're really helping those. We also have a lot of refugees that are in certain parts of the city that are growing, and I know for the school district is hiring English language learner teachers at a 50% year-on-year growth in that particular area. So I'm hoping that we're not forgetting that, having at least some of the material communicated in other languages, particularly, I guess there's Ukrainian and some of these other ones as well, that we're reaching out. And I know that I'm piling on something on our already burdened beast, but we also have many people in the community that want to have their piece, that want to help. And also, in terms of getting the children into housing, I think we need to prioritize new housing developments. Some of the older housing developments, we can't guarantee that they're lead-free. And we already had Bobby Williams in the audience concerned about that, particularly for children and their health concerns. So if we can't get something done on lead this year, then maybe we got to prioritize the young children and pregnant people in the new housing developments.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone else have any comments from the committee? All right, seeing none, I would open the floor to the public. Counselor Jones did explain that we are not planning on any major amendments to this report this evening. This was an opportunity to get a concise, organized report back to council based on these meetings. But I do want to hear from everyone who's here. So please come on up to the microphone, state your name and address for the minute taker.
Hi, Bobby Williams, City Councilor, Ward 2. I just want to say thank you, everybody. This has been quite a process, especially city manager, assistant city manager, members of the committee, members of the public, including Keene Mutual Aid and NADUC Interfaith Project. This was really a community doing, and I think we've come out of it with a very strong strategy that I hope we can take forward and really take the actions in this strategy and make them happen. And I'm here for that, and I know many of you are as well. Just a couple items, notes on this. I'm particularly happy about the safe parking pilot project. And one of the features of that is that it's something that can happen that doesn't have to be a city project. Southwest Community Services and perhaps some local churches are taking this off on their own. You know, the whole community wants to help here. It's not just on the city of Keene, and I appreciate that. I'm also heartened to hear the enthusiasm for accessory dwelling units. I think that's really one of the most cost-effective ways that we can bring new housing into particularly the low end of the market. And I think that's important to do because homelessness really is a housing problem, and a lot of this problem can be solved if we just have enough places for people to live. One thing that I didn't hear mentioned, but I think we certainly mentioned it going into the process, and I know that a lot of work has been done in this area, but I think we still have a ways to go, is the issue of public bathrooms. I was very grateful for the experiment this summer to have a porta potty put out for people to use, and it was used for quite a while. Eventually, it did get vandalized. It would be nice to figure out what we can do to keep that kind of thing from happening. Yeah, I know there's possibilities for basically vandalism-proof installations like the Portland Loo, which is basically made out of metal. And I would point out that we're going into a time when the plumbing under our downtown area is going to be revised, and maybe we can take advantage of that to figure out where we can pipe in some areas for our public bathrooms. Finally, I'd just like to mention one thing I think that does need more attention and wasn't in there was the issue of garbage. A lot of the complaints we hear about homeless people are really complaints about the mess. I'm hearing complaints about litter in my neighborhood right now, and I know that homeless people are getting blamed for it, even though it's not necessarily people who are homeless that are doing it. But homeless people get the blame. If we can do a better job of cleaning up public litter, keeping the area clean, I think that will make the community much more accepting of everybody who lives here. With that, just thank you very much. I'm very grateful for all the work that's happened here.
Thank you, Bobby. Anyone else wishing to speak?
I'm going to try to be brief because I need to be somewhere else. My name is Patricia Lane, Trish Lane, from Monadnock Peer Support. I have been really happy to learn about a lot of things that are going on in the city. I learned about these meetings through Serenity Center. As a part of my job at Monadnock Peer Support, I do outreach. I go around to different organizations. I actually have been working at 100 Nights for the past 9 months as well. So I'm full-time now at MPS. I'm going to extend my outreach as well at MPS. I run 18 groups there as well. I do a lot of research. And I do a lot of time in the community talking to the homeless population. I will not take all the credit because Jason over there, Jason Sullivan, he does outreach with me, and he actually lives at 100 Nights. He's been there for about 2 years. He's an amazing person, and he goes out and does outreach with the homeless. He understands a lot of their issues. And at MPS, we try to bring people in to try to find solutions in their life and find acceptance. We try to learn from each other. We try to teach each other that we're just human. And one of the things I learned at 100 Nights while working there is that one of the major reasons for homelessness is not actually mental illness, but it's actually support. And the fact that you guys are doing this and trying to make supports and connect communities together, the community organizations together, is amazing. I'm actually at the library on Mondays from 1 to 3, and I'm working with Caitlin, the person who works at the table in the middle of the library, to create a community resources map. So we're trying, and I've been getting yeses from all the organizations that I go around to, because I go to over 40 different places to drop MPS information so that people can find out about our services. We have over 30 groups, and we do lots of stuff in the community, and it's a great place for people to find acceptance. I'm also going out with Love Thy Neighbor to do street outreach and to go out into the campments and some of the other places in town. There's a lot of people in this town that do outreach. And actually, one of the places I'm going to next is a Bible study at Hannah's Books. She actually goes to the 100 Nights to go through the books and ask people what they want. She's actually going to be coming to MPS to do the same thing, and I'm bringing some of the members to her Bible studies. I think this community is amazing, and a lot of people are connected here, and I want to be part of that. So if there's anything that I can do, just reach out to me. I'd be glad to help.
Great.
I do have to go to Bible study now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Come on. Sure.
Hi, Laura Tobin. I live on Center Street. So I just want to kind of echo a lot of what was already said. I really appreciate all of the hard work that's gone into this. I feel like I've seen problems over the past couple of years kind of through my firsthand experience. And it's really great to see a lot of those being addressed. And I want to echo what you'd said earlier about the transportation. I think it's really difficult to understand, so I don't drive, and it's really difficult sometimes to understand how that can impact, like, just life, health, all of these things in this area. You know, even you go to the grocery store. Well, do I go to the grocery store or CVS to get my medicine? Because it's dark and they're in two separate directions, and I know I'll be sore because I have to carry my groceries home. And, you know, I also, having studied psychology, I had hoped to get a job in the mental health field, but the main obstacle, I was turned down from a lot of local pretty much every local agency, because I can't drive, because they wanted me to be able to drive people around. I don't know whether that was the reason I was turned down from a job with the city in the human services, but it was suggested that that was the reason. So, and I guess the one other thing I'll add is just kind of highlighting one thing that has really occurred to me, being epileptic, struggling with different things, is that in order to access resources, you do need resources. So anytime someone is tempted to say, well, why don't they just call? Why don't they just do this? It makes a lot of sense when you have the resources to do that. And I think that I have seen how that can impact your ability to access what resources are offered. You know, when you can't find something or when you don't know where to go, that one step of going to the wrong place, you know, walking to the wrong place and finding out that you were supposed to walk to the other side of town, and then finding out that, oh no, they can't do it either. So, you know, at the end of it, it's kind of like, well, is there any point? So I really appreciate you taking the full scope and kind of an all-encompassing look at it. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Is there someone else who'd like to speak with us tonight?
Hello, I'm Ken Cost on 79 Ridgewood. This is just a great piece of work, like everyone is telling you, so again, I need to say that too. There's so many great ideas and thoughts in here. And so they all need, you know, obviously further action and further thought, but I did want to just point out a couple that resonated, and I think that are very, very important. And in recommendations, number 4, about talking to developers, and I heard that there's some of that going on, but the idea of talking to the development community and getting them more interested in coming here. There must be some barriers that they don't come here, and I think the housing needs assessment might get into that as well, but I think that's something important to do, to know. I think we do have a market, and maybe not as robust as in other parts of the state, but certainly plenty of opportunity for developers to start to build mixed income type housing. And then the other part of that point is very important about incentivizing demolition of vacant or underused houses so we could build better quality houses. I think that's just needed for the city in general. And I think that if we work on that sooner, it could have some quicker impact. The other item is the ADUs we mentioned. Again, I think that could almost have immediate impact. I think homeowners, on one hand, maybe are struggling to keep their house. The heating bills are going up, their maintenance bills are going up. So if they could create a small building that they could rent, it's going to help them maintain the houses, and it's going to provide housing. So it's just a beautiful solution to that. And then as part of MIP, I'm just very happy to see the Housing Trust housing development funds mentioned in here as well, and we'd certainly be happy to be part of any thinking that goes along with that. As you know, we've been thinking about that for quite a while. So thank you all for this.
Great, thank you so much for participating. And I think the gentleman in the back has been waiting.
Matthew Hall, 431 Hurricane Road, Keene, New Hampshire. Big report, very nice report, very impressed. I do have some thoughts on it, and I'll try to hit the high points. Not everybody in the rural zone has a lot of money. I'll leave it at that. And I would say, I'm going to look first at the second item under recommendations, housing development, having to do with the modification of the zoning from 5 acres to 2 acres. And I'm not sure if you have been informed of or thought of some of the consequences associated with this. And I would say it's a matter of equity, that it's a matter of fairness in some ways, that I keep hearing incentive, 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 incentive. Why is the group of owners that have acreages from 4 to 9 acres with a house on it, why are the only ones that are not seeing the word incentive waved in front of them? Instead, they're being hit over the head with a charge, because they will be assessed, in most cases, I think, a lot of cases certainly, additional building lot. And I'd be willing to bet that, with rare exceptions, the taxes will increase for these individuals. I do not call that an incentive. Okay. Second, I would consider that regressive taxation. If someone with 4 to 9 acres, suppose they have an eligible, supposedly eligible, it hasn't been proven yet, no test's been done, lot in addition to their home lot, and the taxes go up $2,000. Well, if your house is a modest house now, a quite modest house, and your taxes are currently $6,000, that represents a 33 1/3% increase. If you're currently paying $8,000, that's a 25% increase. If you're paying $20,000, and I'm pretty sure there are some out there that are paying $20,000, that's a 10% increase. I feel it lands hardest on the people with older homes, more modest homes, which often, or maybe I'm generalizing too much, which can coincide with people on fixed or limited incomes, even if they're working full-time. When you go out to the rural districts, everyone sees the new buildings, the McMansions. They tend to not pay attention to the modest housing, so, but it's there. The other thing is, it might inadvertently create non-conforming houses. It appears to me that the assessor said, in response to questions at previous meetings, that they would be the ones who would determine where the additional lots would lie, not the homeowners. So if you sever a septic system, a well, driveway space, parking, all these items, perhaps utilities, from the lot, potentially, that will be retained with the house, that puts the house potentially non-conforming. And the burden to change that could be severe to the homeowner. I say this could destabilize part of the population. If you've got a modest or fixed income, often those people have carefully engineered their budgets, especially if they're retired or approaching retirement, so that they can survive and stay in their homes. This could be a destabilizing factor. What can you say? They have a choice. Pay the increased taxes, sell a lot, move out of town where there are less services. And I would say, even if they elect to sell a lot, if they still have a mortgage, that's going to trigger refinance. The interest rates will be different. Okay? The next thing is, although the city is going to determine how many extra lots you have, the city is taking absolutely no responsibility for the expense should you subdivide. It's going to be surveys. You're going to have to delineate wetlands and slopes, have those plots drawn up, plans drawn up. And that's going to have to be done by a state-recognized wetlands expert for the wetlands. That's not free. You got to determine the suitability of soils for additional septic systems for each house before you sell it, to see whether it even qualifies as developable. And drawing up deeds, recording deeds. If it's an elderly person or a couple that's close to retirement, they might have estate plans or trusts that have to be modified. That's more money. A lot of expenses involved with subdividing, which is fine if you've got a lot of money. As someone mentioned here, if you've got assets or if you've got something to work with, then you can leverage that and get more assets. If you've got a carefully engineered retirement, or if you're on limited means, or you're a working person who is not getting more than, say, $18 an hour, or even $15 an hour, which there are the people that are doing honest jobs out there, even less than that. You don't have that. So I would say that, in effect, it's going to increase a monoculture in the rural zones, because you could potentially be eliminating workforce and affordable housing. You could be seeing gentrification in mansions. I hear people talk about substandard housing. Well, what is substandard housing? I'm sure I've lived in it. I'm sure others have lived in it. However, it provided a comfortable home. It may not be in the 21st century standard. It may be the 20th century, but it still can be a valid place to raise a family. And if they say, well, we would knock it down and build something new, what are you going to build on an individual lot? Not a development. It's probably going to end up be like some of the houses on Old Walpole Road, 3 bedrooms, modest home, selling for somewhere around $500,000. That's not workforce, that's not affordable. That's all I'm going to say on this right now. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to say one other thing.
Okay.
I appreciate your patience. I am hugely in favor of ADUs. I have some experience with them. I'm really pleased to see that this report encourages them. I think there are a number of things that they do. One, ADUs are resilient. It's a public solution to a public problem. Almost everybody who's got a house in Keene can probably figure out a way to put in an ADU. More bang for the buck. Everything's in place in a lot of these places. Put in a kitchen, put in a bathroom, cut some pipes, run some pipes. You've got a housing unit.
That's right.
I mean, simple, you know. And that's why I would say it's nimble. Short design lead time, short approval time, quick development time. The financial bonus already been mentioned. Homeowner gains if they're struggling. New people can come in. If you're an elderly person with a big house like my mother was, you can move into a 2-bedroom ADU and rent it out to a family the rest of the house. She didn't want it, but, you know, it works. Character. When you put in ADUs, you're really not changing the character of the neighborhoods much. You may have to put in a parking pad for a vehicle. That could be done with gravel. The city will approve a gravel one. It's distributed, it's not concentrated as far as traffic. And schools, you put in a housing development on Marlborough Street, that's good. What school do they go to? If you take that same number of residences and spread it out over the city, then those children go to the various schools. No one school gets hit hard in any one year. It's distributed. It's democratic in many ways, and it helps prioritize local people. Because unless they've changed the ADU requirements, the owner of the property, or in a case of a trust, one of the trustees, has to reside in either the home or the accessory dwelling unit. You're not going to get outside real estate investors snapping them up because they can't live in more than one. And if they do that, they can't live in their McMansion. So, and boost to local employment. When you have a big development, local contractors will be bidding against out of the area contractors. And in some cases, if you have a real estate development firm, they will bring in the contractors they want, who they have continuing agreements with. And you may not see local contractors on the job. So when you do that, it's more likely, because they're not going to be tempted to go for a bathroom and a kitchen, you're more likely to see local contractors take the work. The money stays in the community. And that's a multiplication of assets. So that's a local economy as well as a employment. It's green. It complies with the existing master plan. So I think that the carrot and stick approach, the stick hits the small rural landowners the most.
So I would like to just remind you that the 5 to 2 acre lot conversation is not over, and this committee, this report is just a recommendation in regards to that. But you're going to hear a lot more about that at the joint committee meetings as it develops more, and there'll be the city tax assessor will be joining us and going through a really thorough explanation of how that tax process will happen, and we will probably, hopefully, be talking about creative solutions that we might be able to offer, or some direction for the city in that regard, because that has been something the council's very concerned about, that was brought forth by the public during our original conversation. So I'm definitely glad that you're here and commenting, and I would recommend just keeping tuned with the joint committee. That will happen monthly, and you'll get more updates on that.
If I may request, I would like to make a comment that's not related to what's on that, but I would like to make a serious comment with regard to private citizens trying to figure out what, when, and where. And I contacted the city clerk's office Monday because I couldn't see anything on there to do with these issues. And I guess there was some very vague wording about rural discussion or something. It didn't, how's a person supposed to know? And the clerk said, well, just go. And they spent quite a bit of time between three of them trying to even find that. So how's Joe Public supposed to find it? And then tonight, if I hadn't already read this report from the Ad hoc Housing Instability Committee, I wouldn't have known that these items were in it. And I don't really know where it's going next, and the people at city clerk's office didn't know. They said usually it goes in this order, but they said this seems to be moving differently, so we cannot confidently tell you where it will appear next. And if the city personnel are struggling, I'm struggling. So you say, just keep your eye out, but the notice of the agenda comes out, what, 24, 36 hours prior?
It's soon, yeah.
And the window for putting in any comments in writing is,
Open until the following Tuesday after the meeting.
okay. Who reads comments put in, say I put in comments tomorrow? Who reads them?
All of us do.
You
We all
do?
do.
Yeah.
Okay, this is
Absolutely.
something I didn't know. I didn't know if they just sort of in the file and gone.
Yes, and I can tell you, you know, I have spent quite a few years now here, and still sometimes am wondering the path that some of these things take and how it gets organized, and it does get confusing, and I can respect that. My biggest tool, which is not even a counselor tool, I went to the city website and signed up for our emails. It honestly, I get public works emails, I get road closures, I get notifications of all the committees. It's such a resource, and I can use it to inform my family that lives in a different part of the city than where I live, that might need to know that Water Street's gonna be closed down, or what's happening. So 100%, if you have access to email, go to that website and sign up for those emails, and you'll get them in your inbox. And you'll get all of the agendas for all of our meetings, so you can follow along there. When you see something on a joint committee agenda that reads as discussion, there's not any meat there yet. It's really an opportunity for staff to get a feeling about the PLD committee and the planning board's, their ideas of whether they want to put any effort into this moving forward. Once it becomes a formal ordinance, there will be a public notice. And I believe that, just correct me if I'm wrong, gets put in the paper, posted in the building, and then would it appear for a first reading at council and get forwarded on to, and it would come back to council at least twice and have a public hearing. So there are lots of opportunities, even if you miss it at the beginning, so that you don't have an opportunity to be included. But keep an eye on those joint committee agendas. That's probably the first place you're gonna see this rural district ordinance come, open for public workshop.
Thank you so much for listening and for the time.
Yes, of course, and
for all the
anytime.
work that's going on. I am impressed by what is going on and all the programs. And I want to thank everyone, especially for bearing with me.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
All right, anyone else have any thoughts on the report before we keep moving here? One more, okay.
Good evening. I'm Tom Julius. I chair the board of the Monadnock Interfaith Project. I'm actually a resident of Gilsum, 3 Tannery Road.
Okay.
But Like others, I wanted to compliment the ad hoc committee on their work. The Interfaith Project has been researching housing challenges for a long time, about almost 2 years. And we've talked to elected officials, city, county, state staff, social service, the broad array of people that have been mentioned here. Every one of them always at some point says, oh my gosh, housing, it's such a complex problem. And they kind of roll their eyes and think, oh, what could you possibly do? And it's clear that there's no single answer to that. And there are many communities across the country that are wrestling with this. What is really clear from our research, and that is really evident in the work of this ad hoc committee, is that what is necessary is a systems approach. And I think that this report it really emphasizes that. Of course, there are going to be aspects that need to be debated and need to be analyzed in a deeper way. But the way in which this committee is, and the city staff are indicating their commitment to an ongoing systems approach, we find really promising. In addition, as was mentioned several times, the openness to community input has been really encouraging. And I want you all to know that the interfaith community is committed to this long-term systemic approach, and hopefully our presence at these meetings is really indicative of that. As was mentioned, a local church in Southwest Community Services is very close to a memo of understanding about providing overnight parking. They're discussing a lot of the essential elements that have to be put into place to ensure that it's safe for the people that are parking, for the neighborhood, that it's done the right way. And again, that's part of this systemic approach that's really been demonstrated by the work of this committee. And finally, I just want to encourage you all in the city to continue to explore the development of more affordable units, housing units, apartments, small homes, ADUs. It's really the housing stock, especially for low to moderate income households, is very small at this point. That's what all the research shows. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Anyone else? Anyone from the committee have anything to add? Counselor Giacomo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to echo what Tom just said about the more affordable units. This is something we talked about when we were going through the CRD, the Conservation Residential Development, is what affordable actually means, and the difference between affordable and low income, and all. There's a wide variety of different definitions here. You had mentioned for 310 Marlborough that some of those were affordable housing at 80%. 80% that's $52,000 a year you're bringing in. And if you look at the city numbers for the average person working production, the average person working service industry, the average for those is in the high 40s. So you're saying the average person working one of those jobs can't afford to do that. And obviously these are demographics. I mean, production work, I work in a manufacturing plant. We're always struggling to get people to work production, and that's with wages that all went up during COVID. It's still suffering there. And so again, 80%, I know that's what the guideline is that we're given. That's what we're supposed to do minimum. But as we did with the CRD, I'd like to see us try to go beyond that. I know it's harder for development incentives. Obviously, developers want to make, they want to be able to make a buck on this, and I can appreciate that. But I also want to make sure we aren't fooling ourselves into thinking that we are actually providing low-income housing or even moderate to low-income housing. Affordable just means affordable compared to the crazy rates that have happened right now. I mean, they have increased significantly, but not enough to catch up to 80% of the average number. Again, over $50,000 a year that's still a sizable salary. So anyways, that's my only thought about it that I had written down, and just what is affordable?
Yes, that is an ongoing conversation. Counselor Jones?
Thank you. First, I do want to thank Tom Julius. I've known you for many, many years, and I did see you at the county delegation meeting, but you left after you spoke, and I didn't get to talk to you. But thank you for all you do. You've always been a very insightful guy, and I appreciate that. And I just want to add that this is a ubiquitous problem. It's not just Keene having this issue, and I wanted to thank the chairperson for mentioning the parking. It was just last night that the city of Burlington, Vermont amended their parking ordinance to help with the home situation. And maybe we should look at what they did or come up with our own issue with that. And I want to thank the chairman for bringing that up. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Ormerod?
Yes,
A microphone, please.
let me turn my microphone. Thank you for all your input. I want to thank the members of the public who've come here. And for me, it underscores the need to have a systemic, multi-pronged approach to housing. The ADUs, I think, are a very good long-term approach. We may find right now, with labor shortage and material shortage, they may not catch on right away. We may have to start with the larger developments and create some open houses and attract a critical mass to come and start with those. But we need both as well, too. And I could assure you, for the children in the school, they don't necessarily go to the closest school. They get assigned to where there's vacancies, and that's done by the superintendent. Your instincts are good, though, about Marlborough Street, because the elementary school, closest one, has a lot of capacity, but they'll still be bused to the middle school and to the others. So I think that we do have capacity in our schools for a lot more kids and a lot more people. But let's just keep all the options open, because the economic times and factors are going to change, but we're going to put in policies that are going to take advantage of the best parts of all of them over the next few years.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone else from the committee? All right, seeing none, I would ask for a motion.
Is that me?
That's you.
On behalf of the Planning, Licensing, and Development Committee, I move to recommend the acceptance of the final report from the Ad Hoc Housing Stability Committee.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Ormerod, second by Counselor Jones. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, I would ask for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. And again, just a general thank you to everyone involved in this. It's, I think this was the perfect committee to bring this to, because we've been involved in a lot of these solutions along the way, and hopefully we'll be involved in more with the months to come here. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.